So what is TechTrader? TechTrader is a fully autonomous trading system. When I say fully autonomous, I mean hands-off completely. It's been running on live capital for almost 4 years now. I haven't updated the code, I haven't tweaked anything. There's no adjusting of parameters. It's actually completely autonomous. A lot of people are always curious, like, what does this all mean? What's the difference? Why do I say autonomous versus AI versus machine learning versus just saying automated? Well, a lot of times when you say automated or AI, people tend to think it's, next one please. People tend to think it's either quant, or they think stat-arb, or they think high frequency. What I've built here is actually none of that. It's actually a machine that trades like a human being, like a swing trader, a day trader, someone actually sitting at the controls, pointing and clicking. Except here, because it's all digital, I can actually clone that trader thousands of times over. It's a little bit different from what most people are doing in the quant and AI space. Not so much because of just this angle, but also in the way that I designed the learning system. Next, please. So one thing that I always point out is I built the system on my own. So I didn't really have any background formally in machine learning or AI or any of that. So it's automated and it's adapting. But it took me a while to actually start calling it or lumping it in with AI. Next, please. To understand why I do that, let's first take a look at what machine learning is largely considered. Most of it comes down to pattern recognition, things like classification. Essentially, you're kind of like bucketing things all the time. Bucketing things for figuring out things that happened before, what are the chances that they happen again. Next, please. To me, when I look at all that, a lot of it almost looks like muscle memory. Things that your eyes, your senses, your ears do. You know, if you're playing tennis, a lot of times you try and train your hand repeatedly on the same motion so that your muscles remember that stroke. But that's not the same as your mind. Next, please. So one thing that dawned on me was that I needed something that not only had that muscle aspect, but also the decision-making aspect. What I ended up building, the closest thing to it out there right now is most likely reinforcement learning. Next, please. With one caveat. The limitation of reinforcement learning is that it's very goal-centric. What I designed in the stock market instead doesn't really care so much about maximizing a goal, profit, Sharpe. It's more or less just trying to survive. What you end up having is almost a sort of, it's a gaming terminology, but it's almost like an NPC, a character in the game that's more or less wandering around the world and has enough intelligence not to kill itself, but otherwise isn't really trying to do something that complicated. Next, please. Part of the way that I looked at that and designed it was, in my mind, it didn't really make sense that something that was truly learning or intelligent could be bound to a single goal. One thing that I always thought about when I was trading is a lot of times, any given day, I'm not actually trying to make the most money or I'm trying to make the most volatility or any of that. A lot of times, I'm just trying to make just enough to get by. This was during my college years. I was trading essentially to pay tuition. So one thing that came to mind was the objective function itself almost had to be swappable. It had to be able to learn its own objective. TechTrader itself doesn't implement this to the fullest scale. It would be kind of scary if it did. But it is something that I want to explore deeper in the long run. One idea that I have for myself as a personal project is what happens if you actually start it with essentially no goal. As it builds its experiences, it actually learns for itself what to value, what it wants. To me, that's almost getting close to something akin to free will. And a lot of engineers will kind of be like, that's imagination, that's like crazy stuff. So that's kind of where I usually lose a lot of the technical people here. Next, please. But even if you combine these two pieces that you have here, one thing I noticed was that it's still missing something. The problem with this construct, even if you lay it out in terms of muscle memory and a decision-making process, next please, it's still bound by the past. Everything that it's learning could only come from what it's already experienced. And as a trader myself, I always looked at it as thinking, I don't have to see a situation for the first time to realize that it's bad, I shouldn't do it. Right? I'm not going to jump into a small cap, a biotech stock, even though it's my first time. The way that I kind of rationalize that, the reason I'm able to do that is because I'm actually able to imagine forward what might happen, even if I've never actually been in that situation. I added a third process here, essentially trying to simulate that imagination aspect. A lot of people get defensive when they hear the word imagination, but it really is more like just simulation. In a general AI sense, this is very hard. It's very hard to try and simulate the world around you. But in the stock market, it's kind of easier. Everything is buy and sell pressure, demand and supply. So in a sense, this is the higher level idea of how I was trying to build a learning system. Doing it for the stock market, there's a lot of shortcuts you can take to make it a little bit more practical. So what ends up happening is the overall system, I call the layout that I've put together cognitive artificial intelligence. Cognitive means the will to live. And the reason why I differentiate that with a lot of machine learning that's out there is a lot of times you have this machine learning system that's trying to optimize for some goal or trying to always learn and perfect some pattern recognition. But there's not really that sense of trying to survive or make sure it doesn't get killed by its decisions. This layout here and TechTrader overall actually ends up in an agent that is very conservative. One thing that we noticed in the past 4 years is that, kind of like a child, it started out very aggressive and traded back and forth constantly, but in the last couple of years, it almost doesn't trade at all. It makes maybe a couple trades at most every few days. So you see this kind of like crushing of volatility, and also just this really really high pickup in conservatism, almost like what you would see from a child maturing into an adult. So that's kind of the inspiration behind TechTrader and how I'm approaching a lot of my learning algorithms. Longer term, I actually want to try and generalize this into a project called Conatus. My personal interest in all this is I actually think that the algorithm behind TechTrader can be put into something that doesn't just live in the stock market. It's not going to be evil or anything, but it might be like a robot or maybe like just a script that kind of lives with the internet. So we'll see. That's something I'm actively looking for teammates on right now. And to end the presentation, the overall idea, the difference between what I'm doing and what a lot of people in quant or machine learning are doing, the analogy I like to give is a lot of times machine learning, those doing machine learning or quant, they'll crunch thousands of variables just to be able to cross the street. The kind of thought process that my system would do is that it would just look down the street. Then if there's no car, there's no probability. It's physically impossible to be hit. So that's the difference in information flow, if you will, information flow between the kind of system that I'm working on and what a lot of other people out there are trying to do. And that is TechTrader. Thank you.
Do we have a question or two? So we got a couple over here. You guys need a mic or? Yeah. All right.
Really good presentation. You talked about trying to survive as the core of your strategy. Then what is your risk? Like, what do you think about when you're thinking about your biggest risks? whether it's technology, whether it's other people crowding your space, whether it's
So it's more like it's really closer to driving. So a lot of times, and that's a good point, I should have brought this up earlier, is TechTrader doesn't actually predict anything. So kind of like when you're driving a car, no matter how many years you've been driving, you still can't actually tell the person next to you, all right, in the next 10 seconds, a rabbit's going to cross the street. But you have no way to know that. But what you do build up in experience is your reaction, your alertness, kind of just that intuition. It's not so much predicting as much as just being prepared and having solutions to any outcome that might occur. So TechTrader, in a similar manner, when it's buying and selling, it's not so much expecting the price to go like 10% up, 20% down, or something like that. It's more or less watching order flow, the activity of other players in the market, and having a sense of where everyone is positioned. So if everyone's buying at the top, then that's probably a dangerous place to be, and I want to be on the lookout for the first sign of people piling out, because that stock is then going to tip very easily if everyone else starts piling out as well. Not a prediction, but just having that case in mind and having an action plan in mind if that does happen. Does it make sense?
Thank you.
Yeah, great presentation, I agree. I was also going to ask about the survivability, since you said that's kind of what you're trying to maximize, and whether you could unpack some of what you have built into the survivability function, so to speak. But I think you just hit on that. If you have any more to expand, great. If you think you've already covered it, that's fine too.
Yeah, I only have like 10 minutes here, so that's not going to unpack everything. But the website techtrader.ai, I actually spelled out everything that I'm discussing here into a very detailed write-up called Creating Sentient AI. So if you guys want to check that out, it's kind of funny because most people keep like their secret sauce like really covered, and I kind of just put it up there. You can even check out what TechTrader is doing like every day on the TechTrader wall. It's pretty transparent.
Okay, great. We should mention we have a cocktail outside if you guys want to have a drink. If you have further questions for Will, you're more welcome to stay in here and chat. I'm sure he'd welcome that. Otherwise, thank you everybody for coming out. We really appreciate it.